Hello, I'm Professor Good, and in this video we are going to learn how to do the street plate method. So before we begin, let's make sure we have all of our safety protocols in place. So we're going to put our hair back, excuse me, we're going to put our safety glasses on because we're working with a broth. Anytime we have a broth, we're going to make sure we have our safety glasses on. So we're going to begin with, this is what's called a nutrient agar plate. So it's just a petri dish with agar, so it's upside down, okay? And agar is kind of like a gelatin type material. And we're going to label our plate. We always label the bottom of our plates because the lids come off, and we want to make sure that we don't get anything confused. So we're going to label the bottom of our plate with typically our group number, our lab section, what is in the plate, so whether it's, the different types of bacteria, things like E. coli, etc. And we're going to be doing the street plate method. And so if you want to make a little grid for yourself, that's totally fine. So you could put numbers like 1, 2, 3, 4, because we're going to have 4 zones. This is called the quadrant street plate method. And if you want to do that, that would be totally fine. You're going to want to write small and kind of on the edge, not on this edge, but kind of around the circle. So I'm going to put my name and what is in it, which is, in this case, I'm going to use E. coli. And it's important to label before we begin so that way we know exactly what is in our plate, because sometimes you'll be using multiple plates and we don't want to get confused. So we labeled the bottom, but now we want to make sure that the lid is on top, so because we're going to add the bacteria to the agar and not to the lid. So I'm going to put it on the table with the bottom down, and we're going to flame our loop. So this is called an inoculating loop. It has a circle on the end with a braided region. And here off to the side, we have our flame. And we're going to put the entire loop from the tip all the way down to the braided portion through the flame until it gets nice and orange and hot. The hottest portion of the flame is the blue cone, and we want to make sure the entire part gets flamed so that it is all aseptic and contaminant free. So then we need to let it cool for a moment. If we were to go right into the broth, we would hear like snakes, which is a sizzling sound, which is bad for 2 reasons. 1, because it releases bacterial aerosols into the air, and 2, it kills what we're trying to grow. So the loop is now cool. We're going to take our test tube, and again, we have a broth, so it's a liquid, and I often very gently shake it up initially to get all of the sediment at the bottom uniformly distributed. So what you're going to notice is the cap is going to stay in my hand by your pinky. We're going to pass the top of the test tube through the flame, and we're going to go in with our loop and get 1 loop and go all the way to the bottom. 1 loop of bacteria, because there's a little bubble of bacteria, and then pass this through the flame again. So we pass it through the flame before and after. Okay, I'm going to put the flame off to the side a little bit so you can see what I'm doing. So I'm going to then add this 1 loop of bacteria to the plate in what I'm going to call zone or quadrant 1. You're going to have the loop flat with the plate, meaning you want to not make huge dragging marks. And I'm going to very gently, which I'll help you see this in just a second, because we're going to do it 4 times, very gently go back and forth, in what I called zone 1. We are also going to do back and forth in that zone 1 and make sure that we get from edge to edge of that particular area. And again, I'm going to do this 4 times, so I'll make sure that I zoom in so you can see it the next time. When we do all of these, we're going to barely lift the lids to not add any contaminants. So now we're going to take our loop, flame it again. So we're going to flame between each zone for 2 reasons. 1, we're trying to dilute each area because the goal is to get isolated colonies. And 2, we want to spread it out. So again, we're going to get the entire flame on the loop from top to bottom. And I usually say hold it like a pencil and then kind of dip it from the bottom all the way to the top. We're going to let this cool once again. I'm going to push this back just a little bit so you guys can see me a little bit better with this plate. And we're waiting for it to cool 1 more time. And I will go ahead and put some numbers on here so you have a better idea, and I'll show you what that looks like. And the numbers is totally up to you, whatever you want to do. So here I have added 1, 2, 3, 4 on the bottom, because again, if you put it on the lid's going to rotate. So we're only going to get 1 loop full of broth total. We're not going to go back in because we want to dilute it. We want the bacteria to spread out so we can get individual or isolated colonies. So now that the loop is cool, I'm going to barely lift the lid, and I'm going to go from my zone 1, so here was my zone 1 right here. I'm going to go to zone 2, and I'm just going to drag, so here's my loop, and it's kind of hard to do this because you're going to do it flat on the table. I'm just going to drag 3 or 4 lines into zone 2. So from 1 to 2, 1 and 2 are going to overlap, and then that's it. So I'm going to flame my loop again. So again, we're flaming that loop again. And if you just were to do this, you would only get the tip contaminant free, and then we could potentially add contaminants at the end. So again, if you put it like a pencil, kind of dip it in, it's all nice and red hot, and that angry part of the flame, that blue cone. And you also want to make sure that we let the loop cool between the flaming and the plate. Otherwise, again, you hear which are the snake sound, which is going to be killing the bacteria that we want to grow, and we would damage the agar. So things to think about as you're going through each of these zones, which is zone 1 through 4, because it's called the quadrant streak method. Are you overlapping zones 1 and 2, 2 and 3, 3 and 4, so that you are dragging from each section? But you do not want to overlap 4 and 1, because 1 should have the least amount of colonies after incubation, and 4 should have the least amount of colonies. So 1 should have tons, because that's where it was the least dilute, and 4 should have just individual colonies, which is what we're looking for. So the loop is cool. So again, you're going to be doing this flat on the table, but for you to be able to see, I'm going to have to hold it up. So now I'm going to drag from 2 to 3. So I'm just rotating the plate slightly. I'm going to take my loop, and I'm going to drag 3 or 4 lines. So 1, 2, 3, all the way from edge to edge, from zones 2 to 3. Reflame the loop, which I'll let you see. Get it all nice and red hot. And students often ask, how long do I flame the loop? Honestly, there's not an exact number. It is when it gets nice and red hot, and I also get the question of how long do I wait for it to cool? You just have to be patient. So whenever you think that it's cool is when you would go to the next zone. It's important to keep this lid as closed as possible so that we don't introduce contaminants. So at the end of this demonstration, I will actually take the lid off, which you're never going to do, just so you can see the streaks on my plate. And as I'm doing this, the loop is parallel, flat, with the agar. We're not going to tip it on its side, otherwise we'd have these huge drag marks. It's also important we do not want to streak the lid. There's no bacteria on the lid, there's no nutrient agar on the lid, nothing would grow. And the purpose is to get this streak plate, these isolated colonies. So now I'm going to drag. So here was my zone 2. I'm going to go from, here was 2. I'm going to go from 2 to 3. Actually, I already did 2 to 3. I'm going to go from 3 to 4. So there's 3. I'm going to go from 3 to 4, and that's my last one. So let me hold it up so that you can see. It's going to define it. So you can see them if you hold them correctly. And we're going to pull, and this is opening more than normal. I just want you to be able to see. So normally you would not open it. I'm just going to pull 3 or 4 lines. Just feather light touches, 3 or 4 lines, and we're all done. So before I put this away, I've got bacteria on my loop. So I'm going to flame the loop one last time. And remember, I only got 1 loop of bacteria total. So that was it, just that one little bit. And believe it or not, we'll grow a ton in just that one little bit. So I'm going to go ahead and turn the Bunsen burner off, because when we don't need it, we're going to turn it off. And I'm going to show you what this plate looks like. Again, you're never going to open plates like this, ever, ever. But I just want you to be able to see kind of what these streaks look like. So if I hold the light just right, you can see here was zone 1 with a lot of streaking back and forth from edge to edge. Then we pulled into zone 2. And again, edge to edge, pulled to 3, and then pulled to 4. So as you do that, you have these lines, but there's not huge gouges in the agar. And again, you're never going to take the lid off this far. but just so that you can see kind of what I did. So last but not least, kind of like a cooking show, I'm gonna go get, just a second, a plate out of the incubator so you can see the result. Okay, so now I'm back, and we have the results. All the white are what we call colonies, that's growth. And you can tell where we were. So this was zone 1 where we had lots and lots of growth. Zone 2 had a little bit less. Zone 3 had a little bit less. And then this is what we want by the time we got to zone 4, these nice individual isolated colonies. We want these individual colonies to determine whether or not we have a pure culture. And if we didn't have a pure culture, we could pick one of these isolated colonies and do what's called subculturing and do this again on another street plate. So this is called the street plate method. I hope that this was helpful. You will be doing street plates throughout the semester, including a lab skill at the end of the semester. So it's important to understand the technique. And if you have questions, you can reference this again or ask your instructor.